Good evening, everyone. I'm Shri Kumar, a research scholar from Center for Women's Studies. I welcome all of you in this reading, which we are doing session 32, Buddha or Karl Marx, which is one of the writings, chapter 18 from the writings of Dr.B.R. Ambedkar. इससे पहले कि हम आगे बात करें इस सेशन के बारे में, मैं थोड़ा सा बताना चाहूँगा कि फेमिनिस्ट फ्राइडे ग्रुप जो हम चलाते हैं with my other colleagues who are not present because they are attending some other sessions going on in SSS2, which is on caste question. तो हम लोग आइडिया इस ग्रुप को चलाने के पीछे दो तीन था. एक तो फेमिनिस्ट रीडिंग्स जो हम कर रहे हैं ताकि वो रीडिंग्स हम उन लोगों तक पहुंचा सकें, उनके एटलीस्ट तो कॉन्सेप्ट फेमिनिस्ट कॉन्सेप्ट्स उन लोगों तक पहुंचा सकें जो इस हो सकता है इस डिसिप्लिन के ना हो. दे कम फ्रॉम इकोनॉमिक्स, हिस्ट्री, लिटरेचर. तो ये एक ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म है जहाँ पे अलग अलग रीडिंग्स के अलग अलग सेशंस के अलग अलग स्कॉलर्स कैन कम टुगेदर एंड डिस्कस ऑन फेमिनिस्ट कॉन्सेप्ट्स. उनको सिंप्लीफाई करना है इस एंड फॉर द प्रोसेस ऑफ सिंप्लीफिकेशन वी टेंड टू यूज़ मल्टीपल लैंग्वेज. आई एम अवेयर ऑफ 2 लैंग्वेज, तो इंग्लिश और हिंदी मैं दोनों यूज़ करता हूँ, लेकिन लैंग्वेज यहाँ पे कोई बाहर नहीं है, तो हम अपने कॉन्वर्सेशंस में वी कैन ब्रिंग एनी लैंग्वेज. Third was to create a safe space for people from different spectrums of gender identity. So we have participation from sexual minorities, whole spectrum of gender equality. तो ये ऐसा space है जहाँ पे हमारा मकसद खाली academic concept को सीखना नहीं है, but to apply in our own lives. So there are some times when there are people and we are fortunate that लोगों ने share किए कि उनकी life में gender plays what role, or what readings how we can apply in their own personal life. Because होता क्या है ना, feminism or in general gender studies is not there is no dichotomy between academic and activism. दोनों साथ के साथ चलते हैं and we are a product of gender construction. and इसीलिए हम थोड़े से reflective exercise अपने readings में रखते हैं. If you feel safe enough you can share about what your understanding is. तो स्ट्रक्चर क्या रहेगा इस सेशन का? We pick up one text every Friday at 5 PM at the same venue. We read it, half an hour 45 minutes का reading होता है. बीच में you are free to make interjections. That's why this place is not hierarchical. ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई प्रोफेसर को हम बुलाते हैं. So we are all students. None of us claim कि हमें पूरा आता है या फिर we are expert on gender studies या फिर on Buddhism or Karl Marx. None of us is an expert. But we are open to discuss any idea from different discourses. तो इसीलिए it's non-hierarchical, very inclusive space. एक टेक्स्ट लेके आधे घंटा उसको पढ़ेंगे. We literally read the text. I have also shared the highlighted version, but if you are not, we'll read the text, some part of it, and then in the second half, which is last का जो आधा घंटा होता है, उसमें we'll discuss कि इसको कहाँ पे applicable है, कितना applicable है, कितना हमको carry forward करना है, फिर जो भी हमारी understanding है इसको लेके. So without taking, because it's already 5:30, so I'll take the liberty of starting the session. One more disclaimer, we record these sessions for our social media handle. YouTube पे हमारा channel है, we put it all because lot of demand come कि हम लोग session नहीं आ सकते, हम JNU में नहीं है, but you still want to access the recordings. At any point of time you feel that it's uncomfortable, you want to stop it, you want to pause it, you want to suggest an edition of the recording, please let us know. We are open to that also. कुछ live नहीं कर रहे हैं, ठीक है? अभी if there is any is it okay we start the session now? ठीक है. So this one is chapter 18 from Buddha or the Karl Marx. इस particular reading में Dr. Ambedkar has beautifully done. The way of his writing itself is because it's so simple. पहले बुद्धा और कार्ल मार्क्स, तो जो 2 बड़े वर्ड्स, बड़े नाम हैं, उनकी क्या क्या मेन फिलॉसफीज हैं, व्हाट आर दे टॉकिंग, ठीक है, उनके क्या क्या लेसन्स हैं, एंड देन उनमें क्या क्या कन्वर्जेंस हैं, क्या क्या उनके बीच में कॉमन है, क्या क्या बीच में डिफरेंसेस हैं, एंड देन इफ वी आर फ्री टू चूज द पाथ वी वांट टू टेक, ईदर बुद्धिज्म और मार्क्सिज्म और टेक नन, ठीक है, एज यू कैन क्रिटिक दैट पार्ट ऑल्सो. तो पूरा रीडिंग में यही है. पहले इनके बारे में हम लोग थोड़ा पढ़ेंगे. एंड वी हैव टू बी माइंडफुल व्हेन वी आर रीडिंग दिस टेक्स्ट. हम आज के टाइम पे कंटेम्प्रेरी टाइम पे रीड कर रहे हैं टेक्स्ट व्हेन देयर इज लॉट ऑफ, आई वुड नॉट जनरलाइज, बट देयर इज लॉट ऑफ हेट्रेड अगेंस्ट also Marxist, also Buddhist, ठीक है. So we have to keep the political scenario at the background when we are reading this. So let's come and try to read what, and none of it is our view, it's about what Ambedkar has written. So let's read that text. Key comparison between, this is from the first paragraph, I'll read the introduction part. The comparison between Karl Marx and Buddha may be regarded as joke, There need be no surprise in this. Buddha and Karl Marx are divided by, this is 2381 years of this. So they are placed temporally on a very different scale. दोनों अलग-अलग time पे पैदा हुए, दोनों की अलग-अलग philosophies हैं, and it's the comparison itself could be hilarious. But आगे लिखते हैं कि Karl Marx is supposed to be the architect of a new ideology, polity, a new economic system. हमें नहीं पता Karl Marx ने क्या कहा. Let's suppose we have not read what Karl Marx have said or what Buddhism has said, but we do know that there is some political ideology he has constructed and asked for a new economic system, and we'll understand what Karl Marx is talking about, a new economic system. Buddha, on the other hand, is ऐसा माना जाता है, is the founder of a religion which has no religion to politics or economics, which has no relation to politics or economics. वो एक religion की foundation करता है Buddhism, but जिसका कोई भी relationship politics or economics से होना it's considered as difficult or no relation at all. So the reading of this essay, which is on Buddha or Karl Marx, which suggests that either a comparison or a contrast between the two such personalities divided by such a lengthy span of time, and occupied with different field of thought, is sure to sound odd. Marxists may easily laugh at it and may ridicule at the very idea of treating Buddha and treating Marx and Buddha on the same level. So this could be one of the critique कि दोनों को आप same plane पे कैसे रख सकते हैं, कहाँ Marx placed है, कहाँ Buddha, तो why are we keeping it the same plane? Marx so modern and Buddha so ancient. The Marxist may say that Buddha as compared to their master must be just primitive. What comparison can there be between two such persons? What could a Marxist learn from Buddha? What can Buddha teach a Marxist? Nonetheless, a comparison between the two is attractive and instructive. Having read both and being interested in the ideology of both, a comparison between them just forces itself on me. So if a Marxist keep back their prejudices and study Buddha and understand what he stood for, I feel sure that they will change their attitudes. So there is we can see in Ambedkar's writing that he is trying to show a path that if Marxists can hold on to their prejudices for some time and read Buddhism, so there might be a possibility of change in attitude against what Marxism are following. At this stage, we don't know what Marxists are talking about. कि उन लोगों का actual उनका purpose क्या है? So let's come back to the second part, which is heading the creed of Buddha. So in this particular part, Dr. Ambedkar categorically in point format for our own ease, हमें समझाने के लिए clearly point format में रखते हैं कि actually Buddhism का मकसद क्या है? Buddhism, what Buddha is talking. And the Buddha is generally associated with the doctrine of ahimsa. तो एक अहिंसा उनके डॉक्ट्रिन से एसोसिएट किया जाता है. This is taken to by all and end of all teaching. ऐसा समझा जाता है कॉमनली कि जो अहिंसा का पाथ है वो बुद्धिज्म से आता है. बस यही बुद्धिज्म है, जो कि नहीं है. Hardly any of one knows what the Buddha taught is something very vast, far beyond ahimsa. So his teaching goes far beyond ahimsa. It is therefore necessary. इसीलिए उनके जो tenets हैं उनको एक एक करके समझना जरूरी है. And Ambedkar is one of the few writers who will actually give you the source of his comments. तो वो सोर्स भी बताते हैं कि उन्होंने त्रिपिटका, उनकी जो टेक्स्ट है, बुद्धिस्ट टेक्स्ट है, वहां से उन्होंने उठाया है. He is not making up any stories. Now first is religion is necessary for a free society. The first assumption, first teaching is from Buddhism is कि religion बहुत जरूरी है एक free society के लिए. Let's keep this point on hold because Marxists will come on religion with their own understanding of that religion is opium for the masses. So, and we will tackle the question of religion in the that's the half part. Second part which Ambedkar writes about is not every religion is worth living. This is what Buddha is talking, that हर religion जो है, हर धर्म जो है वो worthy नहीं है living का, लेकिन जो धर्म जो है, जो religion जो है वो important है every society के लिए. And I'm interchangeably using the word dharm and religion here because of the lack of a better word in Hindi. I'm not aware of, so I'm using dharm in that sense, but they are different. Religion must relate to the fact of life, and thank you. Religion must relate to the fact of life and not to theories and the speculations about God or soul or heaven or earth. This is where Buddha simplifies things for somebody who believes in science. If you are not really a believer of heaven and soul, heaven and hell, then this is where he talks about that कि धर्म का, religion का जो मतलब है ना, उनका मकसद जो होना चाहिए should be related to the facts of life. इस पर्टिकुलर लाइफ से, इस पर्टिकुलर जीवन से हमारा मतलब होना चाहिए, ना कि गॉड, सोल और ऐसे मेटाफिजिकल चीजों से. It's wrong to make God the center of religion. Buddha is challenging the centrality of God in religion. कि गॉड जो है सेंटर ऑफ रिलीजन को नहीं मानना है हमको. इट्स रॉन्ग टू मेक सैल्वेशन ऑफ द सोल एज द सेंटर ऑफ रिलीजन. तो जो हम रिलीजन के सेंटर में गॉड को और सोल को रखते हैं, दैट्स नॉट व्हाट बुद्धा इज एग्रीइंग विद, एंड वी मे ऑल डिसएग्री विद दैट. इट इज रॉन्ग टू मेक एनिमल सेक्रीफाइस टू द सेंटर ऑफ द रिलीजन. कोई भी रिलीजन अगर एनिमल सेक्रीफाइस को सेंटर पे रखता है तो इट्स रॉन्ग अकॉर्डिंग टू बुद्धा. Real religion lives in the heart of a man and not in Shastras. So we find that it's a frontal attack on somebody who believes that Shastra is the center and not the lives in the heart of man. In that sense, Buddha is considered as an atheistic when somebody does not believe in the centrality of Shastra. Man and mortality must be the center of religion. If not, religion is cruel superstition. अगर जिस भी धर्म के सेंटर में इंसान, man, although we may disagree man and women, but man and morality, कि जो morality है उसको सेंटर पे रखना है. It's not enough for morality. और खाली morality को ही सेंटर में रखना जरूरी sufficient नहीं है to the ideal of the life. Since there is no God, it must also become the law of the life. तो खाली morality को सेंटर में रखना जरूरी नहीं है, because once you remove the God and you bring the morality, then morality has also become the law of the life. So we have to see it as a law. And then we also see later that how this understanding of law differs. The question of religion is so to reconstruct the world and to make it happy and not to explain the origin of its end. मकसद क्या है धर्म का, मकसद क्या है रिलीजन का, is to reconstruct the world, is to make the world a better place, to make it reconstruct the world, but not to look at the origin of the world. हम लोग अक्सर ये समझते हैं कि धर्म की मदद से हम लोग ओरिजिन ऑफ द लाइफ या फिर ओरिजिन ऑफ द वर्ल्ड की तरफ चले आते हैं कि संसार कहाँ से आया, तो ब्रह्मांड भगवान ने बनाया है. इस पे देयर इज अ कॉन्वर्सेशन फ्रॉम वन ऑफ द जातकास. बुद्धा विल ब्रिंग एन इंपॉर्टेंट एनेक्डोट कि अगर कोई इंसान है और उसके 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 सीने में एक जहर से भरा हुआ तीर आके लगता है, एंड इफ यू आस्क इफ दैट क्वेश्चन, यू थिंक द पर्सन विल आस्क अबाउट कि स्वर्ग है कि नहीं है, कि नरक है कि नहीं है, कि मेरी आत्मा क्या होगा, दुख का क्या कारण है. एट दैट पॉइंट बुद्धा विल आंसर कि अभी जो है प्रायोरिटी क्या है हमारी, कि लेट्स एंड द सॉरो फर्स्ट. दिस मेटाफिजिकल क्वेश्चंस ऑफ लाइफ आफ्टर डेथ, अबाउट सोल, ठीक है, इस पे बुद्धा मेंटेन्स ए कंसिस्टेंट साइलेंस, एंड वी विल सी व्हाट अंबेडकर हैज रिटन अबाउट द साइलेंस आल्सो. But it's let's understand the cause of misery in this life, not about the otherly life. So वही चीज यहाँ पे इन्होंने बोली है कि the function of the religion is to reconstruct the world and not to explain the origin. That the unhappiness of the, and this is very important, one of the central tenets of Buddhism is कि जो दुख है world में, it's due to the conflict of interest, and the only way to resolve it is follow the Ashtangic marg. तो जो conflict of interest है, that is the cause of sorrow. And we'll see later that's not the only cause of sorrow, because Buddhism की जो 4 tenets है that there is dukh in the world, and the cause of suffering is also comes from expectations, and the cause of, and due to the conflict also there is a cause of suffering. And we can relate it to when we come to Marxism, that Marxism also talks about the constant class conflict between the haves and have-nots. So we'll see the parallels later. On the 12th point, the private ownership of the property brings power to one class and sorrow to another class. This is self-explanatory कि private property की वजह से एक क्लास को ज़्यादा पावर मिलती है, दूसरी क्लास को नहीं मिलती, जिनके पास प्रॉपर्टी नहीं होती है. It is necessary for the good of the society that this sorrow be removed by removing its cause. So उसके cause को दूर करना जरूरी है, जिसकी वजह से सोसाइटी में दुख है, which is the private ownership of the property by one class. We'll unfold it later, that which is that one class and how it is relevant in the current society, that who owns the majority of the private property. All human beings are equal. This is one radical thought which we can say that Buddha is proposing, that equality of all, which we find in years in I think Second World War के बाद United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, that all humans are equal. Worth and not birth is the measure of man. So it's against the caste system, where you see that it's not by birth, it's by the worth one man is identified. What is important is the high ideals and not the noble birth. Maitri, or fellowship towards all, must never be abandoned. One owes it even to one's enemy. So the issue of the question of fellowship towards even to your enemy. Everyone has right to learn. Learning is necessary for man to live as food. It's again one of the Jatakas talk that when Buddha died, at that point also and this is very similar to Marx. In his Marx also writing, we find that he never preached that this is the only path, this is the right path. He's saying this is one of the paths, and then he also professes that Appa Deepo Bhava. So you find your own path to liberation. But there is a constant need for learning is important, so not to become stagnant. Learning without character is dangerous, which is one of the 7 principles of Gandhi also, that learning without character is dangerous. Nothing is infallible. Nothing is blinding forever. Everything is subject to inquiry and examination. And if we just unpack this statement that nothing is binding forever, nothing is permanent, and just connecting with the religious text, which includes Bhagavad Gita, which includes Shastras, which includes Bible, which includes Quran. So every text is, it says that it's open for questioning, it's open to inquiry and examination. So it prevents us from being dogmatic about any particular ideology, so to say. Even if even one is a believer of Marxist, one is a believer of Buddhist. So any ideology is not, it's open to question. Nothing is final, everything is subject to law of causation. Nothing is permanent or sanatan. Everything is subject to change. Being is always becoming. So the central law he is proposing is that everything is changing. There is nothing permanent. And one of the fables is, एक बार बुद्धा से पूछा गया कि can you go, there's a flowing river, तो अगर उसमें जाके आपको स्नान करना है, dip करना है, so if you go there, Buddha asked his disciple कि go there and have a dip. तो वो जाके उस नदी में एक डुबकी लगा के आते हैं, and then you're asked to go and take dip again. So he go, बाद में repeat करते हैं, and then he's asking the question कि क्या आपने एक ही नदी में दोबारा dip लगाई थी? He's like, हाँ, this is the same river, but it's not the same river because the water molecules which you touched in your first dip have actually moved. So it's a different river. So similarly, the world is so transient and so continuously changing that there is no permanence. Okay, the war is wrong unless it is for the truth and justice. Here we see hints of violence justifying war for the sake of truth and justice. Yeah.
So, when you talk about Buddhist idea that nothing is permanent, so we know that Buddhism emerged as a reaction against Hinduism. It came out of the Hindu stand, right?
Yeah, that's one.
So in that sense, so when you talk about this impermanence, there's a question the 7 life thing. Like Hinduism talks about 7 lives. So in a sense, you achieve moksha at the end of the 7th life. So does Buddhism question that very end, saying that nothing is permanent, things change?
So if I've understood your question correctly, what you're asking is कि हिंदुइज्म में ऐसा बोला जाता है कि 7 जन्म होते हैं, 7 जन्म के एंड में आपको मोक्ष मिलता है, ऐसा हिंदुइज्म बोलता है. So क्या बुद्धा वो अंडरस्टैंडिंग को क्वेश्चन कर रहा है कि नहीं कर रहा है? That's what your question is.
I also want to add one thing.
So don't expect me to answer all your questions. So let's discuss what is the view on this. Yeah.
What the scriptures in Hinduism told about, they almost every time they talked about 84 lakh yonis. Yonis. Because that's the 7th place or 7th birth system is between when we on that particularly marriage rituals. When they talk about the husband that I'm with you for 7 lives, that kind of thing. But particularly in our scriptures, basically, so they talk about 84 lakh yonis. You become tree, you become insect, then you got this kind of thing. So I just want to clarify.
Sure.
And also when we talk about all the scriptures, it's just kind of a question to you that whenever we, not just you, to all of us, that whenever we say that in our scriptures, most of the time we are talking from a very oral history. We have heard those stories or something like that. Unless we have actually read the scriptures or do we have a reference, then only we have a premise to counter it, challenge it, or question or even engage with it.
the very interpretation of what the scriptures are
Yeah,
saying.
exactly.
That's
Because
yes,
unless
can
we
be
have
related.
read it,
Yeah.
yeah, unless we have read it, that is what that is why Ambedkar is different from every other scholar, because he has actually gone, read it, referenced, given references of it, and then deciphered it and diagnosed it. That is the very scientific temper we should also be doing it. We should also be carrying as a research scholars.
Yeah.
So,
I think you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, so you were asking about Buddha's take on it or Ambedkar's take on it?
Essentially Buddha's.
Buddha's. So I think Shri in the initial discussion only made it clear that Buddha is more interested in this worldly affairs. You know? He's saying
Yeah.
ki whatever is happening in this life, we should
Yeah.
focus on that rather than other worldly affairs or just the next birth or not reincarnation, but what do we say?
Rebirth.
Cycle of
Rebirth.
birth.
Rebirth.
and-
Cycle of
yeah.
rebirth. Interesting, the same question is asked to Buddha, which you asked right now, and he'll answer the same question. So when you ask about, is there a soul, is there a life after that, he'll remain silent. He'll remain silent, he'll remain, this is not what I'm going to answer. You ask me about the sorrow, I'll tell you how to remove your sorrow. But I'll not go into the speculative world. Having said that, but Buddha do mention about since I've read some of the elements of Buddhism philosophy, so he do mention about the concept of soul. He's not denying completely soul. Okay. And when you say there is a nirvana, what is nirvana? Is similar to moksha. Okay. Similar to moksha, there is end of suffering, then you have enlightened. So at that stage, there is some understanding of soul. Body ka nirvana, there is some understanding of soul. So we'll come to that also. Okay, so we'll move on. I was talking about the just war. War is wrong unless it is for the truth and justice. कहीं से similar लग रहा है, ऐसा सुना कि एक justified war होती है, कोई ऐसा डॉक्टरीन कभी सुना है? ये युद्ध जो है ये धर्म युद्ध है, ठीक है, ये justified war है. Mahabharat, yes.
What Russia is doing on
What? Yes, exactly. Mahabharat is like, so every war can be just translated and modified according to what just means, right? So there is an element, it's not as simple as what Gandhi would talk of theory of non-violence. So there is an element of violence, which by the way, the question of violence later in this reading is on Marx's take on violence. So we'll come to this question of violence later. Just to add what you said about the scientific temper. So in the previous point which I made, that no text is infallible and binding forever, which includes all religious texts. This is also the fundamental duty mentioned in Constitution, to have scientific temper. And what scientific temper means, इसका मतलब यही है कि कोई भी आपको text, कोई भी ideology दी जाए, उसको question किया जा सकता है, which is what we find in Buddhism. Nothing is okay. Next, let's move to, this is what broadly what Ambedkar has written about 24-25 points on Buddhism to establish the context of our further agreement or disagreement with Marxist thinkers. Let's come to Karl Marx, the original creed of Karl Marx. So what we have understanding of Karl Marx is that he is one of the father of modern socialism. उससे पहले एक आम लोगों के लिए समझ कि socialism क्या है. Important tenets of socialism is one, it is anti-capitalism. Anti-capitalism means the simple structure of profit, where one is there is an ownership of the means of production. कुछ लोग ओनर होते हैं, कुछ लोग लेबर होते हैं, लेबर काम करते हैं, उससे प्रोडक्ट बनता है मशीन्स के थ्रू, और उससे जो प्रोडक्ट बनता है उसको बेचा जाता है, उससे प्रॉफिट आता है, उस प्रॉफिट के बेसिस पे सिस्टम चलता है. इसके अगेंस्ट सोशलिस्ट जो मॉडल है, वेरी लेमन अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज which works on the community ownership of the resources, which does not work on profit, nationalization of resources. ठीक है, उसमें education, health, इस तरह की चीजें जो होंगी, they are not for profit, they are provided by the state, and if it's a state model of socialist. So यहाँ पर Karl Marx की जो understanding है, it's different from, because he is a critique of utopian socialism. He calls all the other fields of socialism those time पे prevalent थे, which is by Charles Fourier, Saint Simon, all these, he'll call these socialists as utopian because these are not practical. And then he'll come and he'll say, I'll tell you what is scientific socialism. And how it becomes scientific is by saying, so he's using 3-4 things together. I'll just simplify it. Pehla, in Marxist socialist, पहला तो there is this notion of inavailability and inescapability. I'll further simplify it. इसका कहने का मतलब ये है कि जो Marxist socialist हैं वो ये कहना चाहते हैं कि there are two class, एक है haves, एक है have nots, ठीक है. मान लो एक लैंडलॉर्ड है और एक टेनेंट है, सिंपल एग्जांपल. तो उनके बीच में, या फिर एक ओनर ऑफ द कंपनी है और एक वर्कर है, तो उनके बीच में देयर ऑलवेज बी क्लास स्ट्रगल, ठीक है. देयर इंटरेस्ट क्लैशेस, देयर ऑलवेज बी क्लास स्ट्रगल. और ये जो क्लास स्ट्रगल है ये कुछ नया नहीं है, ये हिस्ट्री में पहले से चला आ रहा है. सो मार्क्स विल साइंटिफिकली शो दैट लुक एट द पास्ट, देयर वाज दिस ट्राइबल सोसाइटी, ठीक है. उसके बाद लैंडलॉर्ड्स एंड सर्व्स आए, उसके बाद स्लेव्स आए, ओनर ऑफ द स्लेव्स. तो देयर इज ऑलवेज अ डाइकोटमिक डिवीजन इनटू सोसाइटी. उनके बीच में हमेशा से क्लास स्ट्रगल चलता आया है, ये आगे चलता रहेगा. नाउ इस स्ट्रगल का एंड जब होगा जब कम्युनिस्ट स्टेट आ जाएगा. नाउ हाउ इज दिस स्ट्रगल वर्किंग? बिकॉज होता क्या है, जो लेबर क्लास है उनका एक्सप्लॉयटेशन हो रहा है. जब वो फैक्ट्रीज में जाके काम कर रहे हैं तो उनका 4 लेवल्स ऑफ एलिनिएशन होता है. जब वो फैक्ट्री में काम करते हैं, वो टूथब्रश बनाते हैं या फिर कोई भी प्रोडक्ट, साबुन बनाते हैं, सो दे आर नॉट जस्ट एलिनिएटेड फ्रॉम द प्रोडक्ट दे आर मेकिंग, दे आर ऑल्सो एलिनिएटेड फ्रॉम द सोसाइटी. उनके लेबर चार्जेस इतना कम है और जो प्रोडक्ट की जो ट्रू वैल्यू है वो उनको नहीं मिलती है. जो प्रोडक्ट की ट्रू वैल्यू है वो ओनर्स को मिलती है, जो फैक्ट्री ओनर्स हैं. उसके उस प्रॉफिट से वो और ज्यादा बड़ी इंडस्ट्रीज लगाते हैं, वो प्रॉफिट कैप्चर करते हैं, और इसकी वजह से जो लेबर जो है वो मार्जिनलाइज होता रहेगा. एंड देयर विल बी लॉट ऑफ अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट, या फिर एक लेबर क्लास बन जाएगा, डिससेटिस्फाइड लेबर क्लास. और ये जब लेबर क्लास, इस क्लास के अंदर जब कॉन्शियसनेस आएगी कि दे आर बीइंग exploited, so they all will unite, and this is where this famous slogan comes, the workers of the world unite, you have nothing to lose except your chains. So they will unite and they'll overthrow the state, which is again a bourgeois state, a capitalist state. Very simplistic, very linear and very scientific way of explaining things. We'll come to what the critique and what where Marxists fail. And in this process of overthrowing the state, when the laborers will unite, जब सारे laborers इकट्ठा हो जाएंगे और जब bourgeois को थ्रो करेंगे, स्टेट को डिस्ट्रॉय करेंगे, कैपिटलिस्ट को ओवरथ्रो करेंगे, वायलेंस इज जस्टिफाइड. सो व्हाट यू हैव इज थ्रू वायलेंट मीन्स यू ओवरथ्रो देम, यू कम टू द टॉप, एंड देन देयर इज अ डिक्टेटरशिप ऑफ प्रोलेटरेट्स. सो दिस डिक्टेटरशिप विल मेंटेन फॉर सम टाइम, एंड आफ्टर दैट द स्टेट विल विदर अवे. सो द विदरिंग अवे ऑफ द स्टेट इज लाइक, स्टेट जो है वो डिसमेंटल हो जाएगा. इट विल कम टू एन एनार्किस्ट बट अ कम्युनिस्ट मॉडल वेयर एवरीबडी इज ब्लिसफुली गेटिंग देयर everybody according to its ability, and everybody is getting according to their needs. So all the needs will be fulfilled. So this is what a simplistic understanding of Marxism is, what Karl Marx is proposing. यहाँ पे where is he getting his philosophical understanding? Marx ने जो ये process suggest किया है, it comes from Hegel. Hegel is a philosopher who talks about the idea of rational and real. So उन्होंने क्या किया? He talks about thesis, antithesis and synthesis. कि कोई भी एक आइडिया होता है, let's suppose कोई भी आइडिया पिक कर लो, there is equality, और let's say democracy, let's say liberty. So ये आइडियाज हैं. हर आइडिया का कुछ टाइम के बाद एक एंटीथीसिस बनता है, और जब वो एंटीथीसिस बनता है तो उनके बीच में क्लैश होता है, फिर दोनों कंबाइन करके सिंथेसिस बनते हैं. Let's suppose there is individual, then there is civil society and there is state. So एक इंडिविजुअल एक थीसिस है, स्टेट जो है वो उसका एंटीथीसिस है, और उनके सिंथेसिस से सिविल सोसाइटी बनती है. And there is a constant, ये फिक्स नहीं होते, they keep moving. So this sort of movement, what Marx did was overturn this. Hegel was applying this in the field of ideas. Marx said no, what you are doing is just overturn it. This conflict is applicable in the material world. So it's the superstructures is economic, जो base जो है वो economic base है. There is always an economic base to society, which is the struggle between the haves and the have-nots. So we have to understand the philosophical background of what Marxism is. ये मैंने थोड़ा सा ऐसे broad एक landscape ले किया है. Let's see what Ambedkar is also pointing out from the main tenets of Karl Marx. So this is where the Marx contention rested on the following thesis. They are, पहला क्या है? First point is the purpose of philosophy is to reconstruct the world and not to explain the origin of the universe. We see the similarity between the Buddha. The purpose of philosophy is not to find the origin. ये नहीं है कि मकसद की दुनिया कहाँ से आई, पहले कौन आया, ठीक है? That probably scientists can do it through Big Bang and other theories. Let's just focus on the reconstructing the world. ये जो world है उसको explain करके reconstruct करते हैं, उसको reshape करते हैं. The forces which shapes the course of history are primarily economic. This is, we see that he is concerned about the economics. So even in a layman discussion, when we talk of economic as the primary criteria, okay, he is concerned about the economic as the primary force. The society is divided between two class, owners and the workers, already covered. There's always a class conflict going on between the two classes. तो हमेशा दो class के बीच में class conflict होगा. This later on was challenged by thinkers like M. N. Roy. या फिर बाकी लोगों ने भी कहा था कि हमेशा conflict नहीं होता है. There is something called middle class. ठीक है. There is something called entrepreneurial class. There is something called managerial class. So don't simplify it कि हमेशा class conflict होता है. Then let's move ahead. Fifth point is the workers are exploited by the owners who misappropriate the surplus value, which is the result of workers' labor. तो कोई भी जो product labor बनाता है, साबुन, कंघा, टूथब्रश, उसका जो true value है वो उसको नहीं मिलता है. Extra value जो है वो owner के पास जाता है. Surplus value which he calls. Sixth point is, अच्छा ठीक है. I'll try to cut it short. She's saying that don't over explain. ठीक है. Let's move to the key points, which is the exploitation can be put to end by the nationalization of the instrument of production. अगर nationalization होगा तो poverty इसका खत्म हो जाएगा, exploitation खत्म हो जाएगा. Revolutionary spirit among the workers and the conversion of the class conflict into class struggle. कहाँ से आती है class struggle? Class struggle क्यों आती है? Because they realize that class conflict is real. And then they move towards the capture the state and establish the rule, which is the dictatorship of the proletariats. And the irresistible and therefore socialism is inevitable. The very point that socialism is inevitable. Socialism तो आएगा ही आएगा, ये capitalist society में आएगा, and it's the end of the history, which Francis Fukuyama rather make fun of, that this is the end of the history when socialism ended in USSR. So this end of the history phase comes from this, that socialism is inevitable. Now let's come to the common point. What survives in Marxism, Marxian creed, कि क्या क्या बचा है मार्क्सिज्म से? काफी सारी चीजें मार्क्सिज्म की खत्म हो चुकी हैं. क्या क्या बचा है अंबेडकर के अकॉर्डिंग? पहला, लेट्स कम टू सेकंड पैराग्राफ. There is hardly any doubt that the Marxists claim that his socialism was inevitable have been completely disapproved. ठीक है. 1917 में रशियन रेवोल्यूशन आया था, फर्स्ट रेवोल्यूशन, where we saw the dictatorship of the proletariats. Now, it did not come as something inevitable without any kind of human effort. ऐसा नहीं था कि वो inevitable था. It took human effort. There was a revolution and much deliberate planning had to be done with a lot of violence and bloodshed. Therefore, it could step into Russia. तो पहला तो point है कि inevitability जो point है वो question किया जाता है यहाँ पे. Nobody now accepts the economic interpretation of history. Second point जो था कि history is it's a class struggle and economic is the primary force when we consider and study a society, which is also a question that nobody now accepts the economic interpretation of history as the only explanation of history. Nobody accepts that the proletariat has been progressively pauperized. What remains? तो क्या बचा हमारे पास मार्क्स से हमारी जनरेशन तक? At least Ambedkar when he is writing what is the remaining from Karl Marx is 4 points. 1. The function of philosophy remains is to reconstruct the world and not to waste its time in explaining the origin of the world. So let's focus on the reconstructing the world part. Second, there is a conflict of interest between the classes. So there remains a class conflict. Third, which is very important, the private ownership of the property brings power to one class and sorrow to another, which is the cause of exploitation. Fourth is, it is necessary for the good of the society the sorrow be removed by the abolition of private property. तो sorrow को, दुख को खत्म करने के लिए private property का जो abolition करना है वो कार्ल मार्क्स या मार्क्सिस्ट propose कर रहे हैं at this stage. I'll pause here, थोड़ा सा पेस आने से पहले. Like अभी on the same page when we are able to, because अभी हम जाएंगे, हम we'll see what are the common and what are the differences. But till now we have read what Buddhism talks and what Marxism talks about. Okay, just a question. When we were saying that economic is not the only basis for reading history, so what could be the other basis of reading history? Like what could be equally important if not economics? Marxist तो economics की बात करते हैं ना, but what could be other schools of thought which will say no, let's not read history only based on economic framework? Caste system, yes, caste. So that's where subaltern history comes in. Look it from Dalit perspective. If you look at the history, you'll find it very different from the nationalist perspective of history. Nationalist perspective of history is what made Gandhi, Nehru, these icons of nationalist movement. Not necessarily if you read the same history from casteist perspective, right? Anti-caste perspective. Yeah. What could be other ways of looking at history? Religion, yes. It's a very, very big point. Like if you look at history from the conflict between two religions, which is what John Stuart Mill did when he divided Indian history into ancient, medieval, and modern.
James, I think.
Huh?
James Mill.
Yes, thank you. James Mill, not John Stuart Mill. Yeah, James Mill. So if you look at history, ancient history, just finish this point. कि अगर देखेंगे कि हिंदू मुस्लिम की लड़ाई ढूंढेंगे हिस्ट्री में, and if we live that history now, so we'll see that it's one of the ways of looking at history, but not necessarily the only way. Yeah.
The periodization of ancient, medieval, modern, was that James Mill who brought that idea of that classification?
Yes. Yes.
Gender can be
Thank you.
very
मैं खुद बोलता तो ऐसा लगता है मैं promote कर रहा हूँ, but yeah, there's a feminist history, feminist way of looking at history. So we have to be aware of these different frameworks of looking at history. Let's move ahead. So let's come to the important part, which is the comparison between Buddha and the Karl Marx. तो क्या है यहाँ पे? This is where the question between, there's a conversation between Buddha and Brahmin Pottapad, if I'm not pronouncing it wrong, but Brahmin Pottapad. What are the conversation? तो उनसे ब्राह्मण पूछते हैं कि बुद्धा टेल मी इज द वर्ल्ड नॉट एटर्नल, जो ये वर्ल्ड है शाश्वत है कि नहीं है? इज द वर्ल्ड फाइनाइट? इज द वर्ल्ड इनफाइनाइट? इज द सोल सेम एज द बॉडी? क्या सोल और बॉडी सेम है? क्या सोल अलग है बॉडी से? और डज वन हैज गेन ट्रुथ लाइफ, क्या मरने के बाद दोबारा से जीवन होता है कि नहीं होता, पुनर्जन्म होता है कि नहीं होता? तो इस तरह के सारे क्वेश्चंस पे बुद्धा मेंटेन्ड अ साइलेंस एंड देन ही गिव्स द रीजन आल्सो. This question is not calculated to the prophet. This is point 28. This question is not calculated to the prophet. It is not concerned with the Dhamma. It does not redound even to the elements of right conduct, nor to the detachment, nor to the purification from lust, nor to the quietude, nor to the tranquilization of heart, nor to the real knowledge, nor to the insight of the higher stage of path, nor to nirvana. Therefore it is that I express no opinion upon it. Because it is not concerned with the removal of the dukh or the sorrow of this world, that's why I will not express this opinion. Now what happens is Buddha's silence is sometimes interpreted as a weakness. Maybe he does not have the answer. Maybe he is not as enlightened as he is claiming. वो चुप है ना ऐसे questions पे. And the reason he is silent is somewhere it's written also in Buddhist text that if I give you answer, you will modify it according to your religion. Or you will classify me into one of the other sects. And if you have understood the cause of the sorrow, which he will lay down, कि अगर आप ये अष्टांगिक मार्ग follow करोगे, then you yourself will realize the cause of the sorrow. And once you yourself realize the cause of the sorrow, you will not be asking these questions. So there is no point in answering these questions. So this is a position not from a pessimistic point of view. It's highly optimistic way of looking at things. कि मैं आंसर दे तो दूंगा पर आपकी समझ नहीं आएगा. मैं आंसर दूंगा, it's liable for different interpretation, so that's why I'm not answering. And once you understand the cause of the sorrow, you will not be asking these questions. ठीक है, we'll come to this. Let's move ahead. इसके बाद जो question आता है कि as to Buddha's own attitude towards the class conflict, his doctrine of Ashtangik Marg recognized that the class conflict exists, that is the class conflict which is the cause of misery. So class conflict remains a common cause of misery which is mentioned in Marx also. The language is different. This is page 446. The language is different, but the meaning is the same. If for the misery of one reads exploitation, Buddha is not away from Marx. So are we able to see this convergence when we see that the exploitation of certain sections of society, it comes, there is ownership of the property, and it's also the cause of the suffering. The cause of the poverty is coming from the unjust redistribution of resources in the society. दुख का कारण वो है. And we see that there are elements of communism in Buddha also. In the same page, last का जो 7-8 points, I'll just read कि what Buddha is allowing कि क्या क्या एक जो मंक है या भिक्षुनी जो है क्या क्या वो ओन कर सकते हैं. They can own 8 things. 3 robes of piece of cloth for daily पहनने के लिए 3 कपड़े. Then there is a girdle for the lines and the ants ball, a razor, a needle, a water strainer. Even if we don't go by the minimum resources, what he is talking is a minimalist living. Second, he's also talking about a very socialistic way of living. कि resources को each according to its ability and each according to their need. जितनी आपको जरूरत है उतने ही resources use करो. Rest all keep the resources for the others, for the redistribution and common ownership of the public property. This is where he is very close to socialist, and Ambedkar writes, these rules are far more rigorous. These rules are far more rigorous than are to be found in communism in Russia. So this is where we find the convergence. Now come to the question of the means. Now, which is where there's a difference lies between the communist and the Buddhist. I'll read this part. We must now come to the means. The means of bringing about communism, which the Buddha propounded, was quite definite. The means can be divided into 3 parts. First, consisting the observing the Panchsheel, which is where he talks of there is a need to observe Panchsheel. What are these Panchsheel? Is mentioned in the same page. The Panchsheel comprises of the following. क्या 5 observations क्या? This may sound little philosophical, little religious. क्या है वो 5 शील? पहला, abstain from destroying or causing destruction of any living thing. किसी भी living thing को आप destroy नहीं कर सकते हैं. Abstain from stealing or acquiring or keeping any fraud like or by violence. कोई भी property acquire करना through stealing, fraud, violence. To abstain from telling untruth, to abstain from lust, and we find that there is a hint of sexuality कि lust से दूर रहना है. Some feminists, I'm not saying for all, but there are feminists who argue that no, this is not the only way of reading sexuality, the elements of positive sexuality. To consider it as sin or to see sexual activity merely for the cause of reproduction, procreation, is a very limited understanding of sexuality. But again, not to impose present understanding of sexuality on the past. I'll refrain from that. So this is what he is talking. Fifth is to abstain from intoxicating drinks. Now,
on this comment on sexuality and feminist understanding for sexuality, I mean, because I have not read this text, but to abstain from lust, and then you're comparing lust or equating lust with sexuality, I think there might be, I don't know, is there any convergence, there's similarity to it or not? Because my understanding of sexuality and the way this text is seeing lust may be very different. So that is also there.
okay. Yeah. Any other point on this question of relationship between lust and sexuality or what?
So I think lust is like the urge to do it again and again.
Lust is more, I think, as per my
Yeah, but
understanding,
it's different from sexuality.
it's very near to some greediness.
Yes.
It's nearer to it because it's not just lust for sexuality. It could be a lust for wealth or many other things.
No, the wealth part is already mentioned in the second point. That
So you're
keep away
saying that
from obtaining. Yeah, this
lust
is
very specifically for sexuality. Okay.
Yeah. Because some of the sessions in Vipassana which I've attended, they outrightly mention that stay away from the whole concept of morality. This is immoral. To indulge in sexual activity is immoral. ठीक है, तो वो there is an overtone of that sexuality or lust को लेके.
In modern term, basically they want to, maybe if I am wrong,
Yeah.
they are more focusing on a kind of thing like adultery. Because
Yes. Without the sanction of marriage.
adultery, because lust and sexuality, we cannot refrain from this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Vishwamitra cannot refrain himself from doing this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they can say that if you are getting loyal to one and other, also this kind of thing, because lust can be positive, negative, both as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay. Yeah, that's one understanding. Yes. Thank you.
You were saying something?
I mean, if it's performed without the sanction of marriage, it's considered as something immoral or like.
but as time
So are you
changes-
saying that doing it outside marriage is considered lust?
I mean, yeah.
I mean,
you cannot
it could
say
be
this-
related to prostitution also.
Uh,
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, the context in which you.
Buddhist, yeah.
Also, the point about you cannot kill anyone. Something like that was there, right?
Yes.
You cannot kill
Any living being. Yeah.
If we see it, like, as you've already mentioned, applying it in the contemporary context is not.
Yeah.
But still, like, so Buddhists cannot consume non-veg, or people who consume
Yeah.
non-veg cannot be considered as Buddhists.
Right.
Right.
I just got a small question, like
Yeah.
in terms of the Buddhist appeal to austerity, and of course this conservative positions on sexuality and lust. What is the overarching? Of course, it's a question to all of you, like social context to how he comes to think in such conservative ways. Like, is there a wider historical angle to it? Like in maybe Magadha, the way Buddhism came in, like are there any?
That's an important, interesting question. Like somebody from history might explain that what was the position of intermixing in sexuality, or like when Buddha was writing all this. I'm just aware of that there is a separation of bhikkhunis, like male monks and female monks are not there to stay together, because he was aware of the sexual tension. So there is a clear demarcation in that sense. That's the only thing I'm aware of
Also
from
in
the
terms of
history.
staying in monasteries, having
Yeah,
a very
yeah,
ascetic sort of lifestyle.
Yeah. Even their monasteries are separate. So there is a division, strict division there. And somebody from history or other, they have who can add to this.
What is the question? Can you repeat?
The question is basically समझने की कोशिश करें कि जब बुद्धा लिख रहे थे उस टाइम पे, so क्या माहौल था हिस्ट्री में जब when he is writing on understanding of sexuality or intermixing of कैसे सेक्स को लेके क्या समझ थी?
Not just sex, like the conservative position in general, like having a very isolated lifestyle, these extreme positions on sex, of course, and having a very
On prostitution, I'm aware that Ganika, मतलब prostitutes were considered not the way they're treated now. So they used to have whole lot of social power. So they were, they were revered also. So that historically I'm aware, थोड़ा सा. The position of prostitutes I'm talking. I'm not generalizing. Magad के time पे. अच्छा, ठीक है.
See, basically, I'm not from history. My background is management. I
Mhm.
have learned only about commerce and this kind of thing. But
Sure.
the Buddha's time or Mahavir's time, they were almost 2,500 years ago, if I'm not wrong, maybe
Mhm.
more or less. So
Mhm.
at that time, it was kind of being possible to just live in monasteries, do some kind of yogas, eat people on neem leaves for 10 to 15 days to get salvation.
Mhm.
But the main point is today in modern day context,
Mhm.
we just have to take some important lessons from them.
Mhm.
Like we cannot apply their thinking from, because as we are in JNU, every canteen serving non-veg,
Mhm.
we smoke brightly without any fear. So this is a modern context. So we are not committing any sin.
Yeah.
We are, but after 50 to 60 years, things will be more different. But the main essence of here is that we have to be aware of other living beings. I cannot say that for poultry living beings, because they are meant to be feeders.
That's people can have a different opinion on that also.
But as time changes, context also changes, and this all of the writings which were basically prior to 25 years ago.
So you're saying it's because it's so old, we need not necessarily apply in the present society.
Like in Constitution, we amend every time, so there need to be some amendment in this kind of things also.
But Buddhism has evolved, so there are different
Yes.
forms of Buddhism. Like
Different
when he's
forms of
writing, so there is
Buddhism.
Hinayan, then there is Mahayan, then there is Vajrayana, then there is Navayan Buddhism. So there are different evolution within Buddhism.
And that's
also.
what the beauty of Buddhism,
True,
because
true.
it is different from other religions.
True.
It accepts change.
Yeah. And the question that because it is old, yes, it's difficult. I can agree with that. It's very difficult to follow all these strict shilas, like the promises which he's expecting us to do. But then I'm sure there are people who follow this. Like in the present time, people follow this.
But they are rare. They are really rare.
Then it would be a question of like majority and minority. Like, do we agree? We don't have to agree with the minority in that case. But it's a practicing style. People still follow. Like Jainas follow. Like imagine the level of that.
With a different religion.
जैन में जो क्या होता है
After
श्वेतांबर श्वेतांबर जैन,
Shwetambar and
दिगंबर
Digambar
जैन.
Jain.
Imagine the level of difficulty. So it's difficult from this position, but from their position it's very much practical and followed. But yeah, you, like you said, the numbers can vary. Yeah, you, I think she raised the hand. Please.
About this lust part,
Yeah.
and this one, I haven't read Buddhism literature.
None of us have read Buddhism, so
But
we are
I'm-
just
no.
yeah.
I'm wondering if it's a general comment on desire itself as lust, and
Yeah.
may not be necessarily sexual lust, but
Desire
in
in
general.
general. Yeah.
That is what I was thinking, because he talks about renouncing all these things, like थोड़ी थोड़ी चीजें ही रखनी है अपने पास.
हाँ,
The things that he mentioned.
Yeah, yeah.
Desire is the cause of sorrow.
Desire is the cause of sorrow. Yeah, yeah.
It's more
So if
Maya.
Moh and Maya. So if you have a kid and then you desire that he or she will marry somebody, then if doesn't marry, then you get into that sorrow mode. So yeah.
Yeah, so with respect to like killing or not killing, like it differs like what kind of Buddhism you are following, because in Mahayana it involves lot of killing, like the Buddhism that is followed in China, it involves killing, and
Yeah.
they do eat lot of
True.
like non-vegetarian food. And with respect to the kind of socio-economic conditions in which the Buddhism evolved,
Mm-hmm.
so like this is also a point with respect to killing, like the religion that was followed in
Absolutely.
this region, like we call it Hindu religion today, but whichever was the like
The sect.
yeah, that was followed in this region. So when the Hinduism of that time degraded, it degraded due to the fact that there were too many rituals that involved killing.
Yes.
So Buddhism and Jainism were kind of the heterodox sect. They got out because of this thing, because people were not, the common folk were not able to afford these rituals,
Right.
which the like
Yeah.
the priestly class of that time were prescribing.
So it was also a political move. I think
Yeah.
just to challenge the Brahminical, we can't use Brahminical
Yeah.
terms, but the practice of killing, जो बलि देते थे,
Yeah.
बलि देते थे, this was against कि यार मत मारो इनको.
Yeah.
Population is not at all.
And the whole thing of vegetarianism comes after that, because Hinduism then says that Vishnu is like Buddha is one of the avatar of Vishnu,
Mhm.
and then they stop their like reduce their killings and all these rituals,
Mhm.
and then they adopt this vegetarianism, the
Vegetarian.
kind of
Vaishnav.
the kind of politics that plays today in the name of vegetarianism comes
Yes.
from that thing only.
And the whole controversy around
Yeah.
beef.
But the reality is that the same class was killing these many animals.
True.
Like that is the irony.
We find that in Ambedkar's reading clearly giving
Yeah.
a citation with a quote.
Yeah.
Like where do you find against beef? Okay. On camera, this is all I can speak. Let's move ahead. Let's move ahead. Let's move ahead with without going into the other 8 अष्टांगिक मार्ग उन्होंने फिर एक्सप्लेन किया कि क्या है एक इंसान को क्या क्या फॉलो करना चाहिए, राइट व्यू, राइट स्पीच, राइट कंडक्ट, राइट लैंग्वेज, राइट livelihood. Very difficult to follow. Next comes the next page. He talks about the difficulties. Then he talks about ये तो path है. Then what are the difficulties which you rightly mentioned कि ये क्या difficulty होंगी. Buddha also thought about कि मैंने बता तो दिया है, but जब इनको follow करेंगे तो क्या क्या दिक्कतें आएंगी. तो पहला he just gives 10 points. क्या पहला, delusion of the self. So this is where the cravings comes in. That the chasing from every bauble that he vainly thinks will satisfy the cravings of his heart. There are no noble path for him. So there is a constant desire and craving is one cause, which is the delusion of the self. Second is the doubt and indecision. Doubt and indecision comes, what Buddha has done is he has taken away the God from a religion. So if you remove God, if you remove Vedas, Shastra, the society which was following a given path of right and wrong, and then you suddenly create a vacuum. So you move into the area of what the Western philosophy calls the existential dream. So now nobody is there to tell you what is right and wrong, and you are dawned upon this the whole responsibility, what Sartre calls, that in order to live an authentic life, you are the only person who is responsible for your life, and in that position to do and not to do. So to act or not to act. So this indecisiveness, or it will either lead to when this understanding comes, so this will lead to either inactive mode of living or indecisiveness. So this is where the second hurdle comes in, the doubt and indecision. Third is which is the efficacy of the dependency on the efficacy of rites and ceremonies. So this was the challenge कि rituals को लेके आप इतने ज़्यादा, because you have been performing rituals, so it looks so naturalized to you that to give up rituals will be the third challenge. कि अब सुबह उठ के पूजा तो करनी है, but ठीक है, अगर भगवान की नहीं की तो पूजा किसकी करेंगे, या फिर कौन से वो rituals होंगे. So this is the third challenge. Fourth is the bodily passion, which somebody mentioned about the desire and the lust, if not the same, but bodily passion could be the another challenge. Fifth is the ill will, and ill will towards the other individuals, which is where you can see the discrimination part. Sixth is the suppression of the desire for future life with material body, and seventh is the desire for future life in the immaterial world. So this desire for heaven, desire for material good in the future life, ये सारी चीजें जो challenges होंगे. Eighth is the pride, and ninth is self-righteousness. Self-righteousness means this contempt for those who are less able and less holy than ourselves, which can also come from the position that somebody has read so much, and we can link it to the academic spaces also. So if somebody has read so much that they are not open to challenge, that their whole knowledge could coming from the position of top down is also it's also a hindrance to the future learnings. So this is self-righteousness. And then the 10th is the hindrance is the ignorance. So the doctrine of Eight Noble Path tells what dispositions of the mind which a person should seductively cultivate. Okay, now this is what we have read कि कौन से वो 8 path हैं and क्या क्या उसके 10 challenges हैं जो कि एक बुद्धिस्ट monk को जो practicing Buddhism को face करना पड़ेगा. And now he gives the 10 virtues in one's daily life. So I'll just not rush through, I'll just name these virtues, not to promote what idea of Buddhism is, but to understand what Ambedkar is trying to come upon. Finally, where he's trying to reach. Where he's trying to reach is कि कैसे what Marxism is lacking and what Buddhism can support. तो उसके लिए एक background तैयार कर रहे हैं. क्या है वो 10 virtues? One is the Pana, which is the wisdom, which is beyond doubt, like अविज्ञा, मोह, इन सबसे दूर जाना है. Pana requires that one must get all his doubts removed by questioning. So this constant desire of learning comes from the desire for wisdom, and which is a desire for questioning. Second is the Shila, which is a more temperament, the moral temperament, the disposition not to do evil. Shila is like it means fear of doing wrong. Next is Nekham, which is the renunciation of the pleasure of the world. Dan, which is giving of one's possession, blood and limbs, and even one's life for the good. Vira is right endeavor. Kanti is forbiddance, not to meet hatred by hatred. Which is what close to Gandhi is when he says that eye for an eye will make the whole world blind. So even while dealing with hatred, if you can bring some amount of empathy and not to meet hatred with hatred, it is appeased only by forbearance. Next is Sach, which is the truth. The aspirant of Buddha never speaks a lie. His speech is truth and nothing but the truth. Adhishthan, which is determination to reach the goal. So this commitment is Adhishthan. Metta is the fellow feeling extended to all beings, foes and friends, beast and men. Last is Upek, which is detachment, and which is important. Detachment को लेके हिंदू भगवत गीता में there is a talk on निष्काम कर्म. So अब कर्म करो, ये सुना होगा, कर्म करो, फल की इच्छा मत करो. यहाँ पे जो distinction है is making is this is distinguished from the indifference. Detachment is different from indifference. So detachment, it is a state of mind where there is neither like or dislike, remaining unmoved by the results and yet engaged in the pursuit of it. So you are detached from the results, but you still continue to pursue it through Adhishtan. I'm not an expert on either Buddhism or Bhagavad Gita here, but there will be some amount of convergence between Nishkam Karm and this idea of Upek. Now let's come to the last part. It is clear that the means adopted, this is what Buddha is adopting as means. It is clear that the means adopted by Buddha were to convert a man by changing his moral dispositions to follow the path voluntarily. Now the word voluntarily is important. What he is promoting is कि अब अपना पाथ चेंज करो, ठीक है, बाय चेंजिंग योर मॉरल डिस्पोजिशन. सो ही इज गिविंग अ मॉरल फिलॉसफी, moral way of living voluntarily. The means, and this is where the difference lies with the communist. The means adopted, जो communist हैं, they are very clear. The means are short, clear and swift. क्या है? पहला violence, second is the dictatorship of the proletariats. So ये दो चीज हैं जिसपे we see it is now clear that the similarity and the difference between Buddha and Karl Marx, the difference are about the means. End is common to both. So the both दोनों का end वही है कि end suffering करना है, ठीक है, एक्सप्लॉयटेशन को खत्म करना है, लेकिन मीन्स अलग अलग हैं. नाउ लेट्स कम टू द इवैल्यूएशन ऑफ मीन्स. सिंपल एग्जांपल, मीन्स और एंड का जो डिबेट है, इट्स नॉट न्यू. मीन्स और एंड को लेके अंबेडकर और गांधी में भी डिबेट था, ठीक है. कास्टिज्म या फिर कास्ट डिस्क्रिमिनेशन को खत्म करना है, बोथ एग्रीड कि हाँ, किसी का एक्सप्लॉयटेशन डिस्क्रिमिनेशन नहीं होना चाहिए. None of the caste should face discrimination, but the means were different. One, somebody adopted Ambedkar actually took the class struggle to next level by using the language of rights, and Gandhi on the other hand took on the path of reforming Hinduism. So they referred extensively on the path and the means to it. Now taking, and this is one of the means is violence. Let's read what Ambedkar has to write on violence. Is take violence. As to violence, there are many people who seem to shiver at the very thought of it. Like Gandhi would be one of the person who will shiver with the thought of violence. But this is only a sentiment. Violence cannot be altogether dispensed with. Even in the non-communist countries, a murderer is hanged. Does not hanging amounts to violence? Non-communist countries go to war with non-communist countries. ऐसा नहीं कि खाली communist ही violence कर रहे हैं, non-communist भी violence कर रहे हैं. Millions of people are killed. Is there no violence? If murderer can be killed because he has killed a citizen, if a soldier can be killed in a war because he belonged to a hostile nation, why cannot a property owner be killed if his ownership leads to misery for the rest of humanity? तो जब एक सोल्जर मारा जा सकता है, एक मर्डरर को हम फांसी चढ़ा सकते हैं, तो एक प्रॉपर्टी ओनर को क्यों नहीं मार सकते? Why is this? Do we have to make? And this is where he making this point. There is no reason to make an exception in favor of private owner. Why not should regard private property as sacrosanct? Like why should we regard private property as sacrosanct? तो क्या reason हो सकता है कि हमको property owner को नहीं मारना है? Which is communist propose करे कि हाँ property owner को मारना है. Any thoughts on this? क्यों? Why is the violence of a soldier different from killing a property owner?
Because the soldier does not have an agency. Right? In the war, the soldier is just a pawn to forward the campaign.
The agenda.
The campaign.
Okay.
But here the proletariat has that agency to go and use violence.
Okay. But is the killing of a property owner justified? We all own some amount of property. If not we, then our parents do own some amount of property, right? So what he is arguing is the killing of a property owner is justified because it's the same violence which a soldier will do to another soldier, or for that matter कि कोई criminal को अगर hang किया वो भी तो violence है. So how there is a difference?
Soldiers are also fighting for property, no? Like if they are taking our land, okay, we are killing them.
Mm-hmm. So they are fighting for land.
That's what they are doing, no?
Not to capture and maybe to protect.
Not to protect. So property owners are doing the same.
But these property owners have their
If
own
you will not
soldiers.
protect what is
State
yours.
is soldier. State is protecting them.
But reducing the entire proletariat fight to simply land acquisition is also reductionist.
Yeah.
Killing
Okay,
is
agree.
not a justified thing to do.
Does Marx use the term dictatorship of the proletariat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Technically, we have killed all this property owner by imposing zamindari in terms of papers.
By abolishing zamindari.
By abolishing zamindari.
So we have killed the property owner.
It should be metaphorical.
Okay, two things. There are interesting points. One is that there is no. So we moved from zamindari. So when we became independent, we abolished zamindari. So there is no similar the bourgeois class there. That's what you're saying. कि कोई नहीं है अभी कोई जमींदार नहीं है. So that
There are, but not that much.
okay. So that depends upon how what was the efficiency, what was the implementation of that act, how
Yeah.
beautifully that act was implemented or not implemented. So if it was 100%, that means we have abolished zamindari. But if you look at the implementation of that, so how much property was actually transferred from zamindar to the people who are not having land? Was it just transferred to their family members
No,
to
the-
evade the law? So for that,
The land reform were done only in West Bengal and Kerala.
exactly. This is where the success of land reforms comes in. Which states successfully implemented land reforms? Which states like Haryana, UP, Rajasthan failed to implement land reform? This is where the post-independence history becomes important. कि हम कितना successful रहे land reforms को लेके. Yeah, please. ठीक है, sure. On the question, if I may add.
Was nice.
Thank you. If I may add, let's keep the soldier वाला violence अलग से. But what about the violence against the murderer? Criminal है, उसने murder किया है, उसको फांसी की सजा मिली है, ठीक है? That person is hanged. This is violence. And then how is the violence against somebody like property owner? We all part of being part of the property owner. So how is this violence justified? Are these violence same? First, are these violence same?
I think owning a property has been so normalized that we don't consider it to be a crime and then to go and kill someone on it.
Okay, so it's so normalized.
Yeah, it's been normalized.
Okay. Is it somewhere in the constitution they talk that right to have property, or our constitution is against owning property?
No, I think constitution promotes
Property.
property rights. Yeah.
No, that was removed.
I think.
That was in FR, but it was just made a like FR से हटा के.
FR, but then
Yeah. So it was a fundamental rights which was amended up 1978, if I'm not wrong, 44th Amendment, or probably 42nd.
So it has a legal backing.
But it still is a legal right. It's
Yeah.
not a constitutional right, it's a legal right to own property. So with that sense, to have violence against somebody who's owning the property, it's illegal.
No, that thing is true. Where you raise the point that our parents are also, owning property. I think we
Right.
cannot compare it here because the sentence is like, why cannot a property owner be killed if his ownership leads to a misery for the rest of humanity?
Yeah, but some amount of ownership is causing misery to somebody, right? If you have limited land, it is a cause of misery to the. If in a village there are like 100 acres, 80 acre is owned by one community. So it's a cause of misery for the 20%.
Maybe we can see it from this example that in Delhi only if we see the housing inequality. So there are people who own villas or maybe 2 BHKs and they can actually accommodate 4 or 5 people, and then there are people who live in slums. They can't even afford to, have a kitchen-like space. So in that form also there is this like disparity and inequality which exists. So if ideal अगर आप communist ऐसे village देखोगे या space देखोगे तो it should be like everyone who needs space have that kind of a space. So this spatial segregation shouldn't be there. तो वो demolish करने के लिए obviously from his point of view that private property actually manifest into the violence against certain society, certain community. All these gated communities, what are they doing? They are doing similar thing, na? They are perpetrating violence against other people. They are shifted to the margins. They are living over there, and then they are the people who will come and clean your society. But then they don't have clean spaces to live. Isn't it a violence? We can see it from that aspect also.
Murder is like taking someone's life. So it's something
Yeah.
very direct.
So
Yeah, very
Okay,
direct.
so you're talking about the impact which you see and the impact which you don't see.
Yeah.
But the violence that you see and the violence that you don't
Oh,
see,
usually.
the harm. So, for example, the kind of psychological violence one has to go through because of health deterioration, and the mental health problems, because of the lack of space and resources and everything else. So, if you will see from that way, मतलब justice तो नहीं है ना. It's not a just society that we live in. The people really don't have that kind of.
Also, Marxism talks about the abolition of private property, but does it also suggest alternative? What alternative do we have if we just abolish private property?
And Marx also wrote during the time when revolutions were extremely common. So extremist tendencies were very easy to observe.
Yeah, you're correct in the sense that it was time of transition. But I think revolutions are part of, I think, contemporary society. If not in India, probably, but there are some element. And it keeps coming back. Socialism keeps coming back in different forms. Like we had Occupy Wall Street movement, 1% against 99%, because of the difference. जैसे वेज के बीच में इनइक्वालिटी बढ़ेगी, ऑक्सफैम की रिपोर्ट वही तो बोल रही है कि इनइक्वालिटी बढ़ रही है इंडिया में, ग्लोबली. So there is always this demand of reviving socialism in different countries. ठीक है, the question of violence. So for now, let's go back to the text. So the Buddha was against violence. Let's understand Buddha's stand on violence. Is it same like Gandhi? Buddha was against violence, but he was also in favor of justice. Where justice required, he permitted the use of force. This is well illustrated by his dialogue with Senapati, the commander-in-chief of Vaishali, and which is where the conversation goes on. And then this person is asking commander-in-chief कि अगर कोई हमारी औरतों पे, कोई हमारे लैंड पे अटैक करेगा तो क्या हम धम्मा के नाम पे, like, should we not do violence, should we not protect our territory? A common question. So now the Buddha replied, you have wrongly understood when what I have been preaching. An offender must be punished. An innocent man must be freed. It is not a fault of a magistrate if he punishes an offender. The cause of punishment is the fault of an offender. This is where we have to distinction between the legal understanding of violence. तो जो magistrate या जो murderer है उसको जो सजा मिलती है, it's through a process of law and through the law which is equally applicable to all part of the society. So when that punishment is given, it's only because the offender is the cause of that punishment. It comes from the offense which a person is created. But in case of violence, which is structural violence, which is the division of the property, because it's legally in India to own a property, so there is no amount of there is no amount of I'm not saying there is no amount of violence, but there is no demand, there is no right to ask for a punishment for somebody who's owning the property. So if somebody
because
kills,
it is not seen as an offense. No?
it's not seen as an offense, and if somebody kills the owner of that property, then it's subjected to the trials according to the law. A man who fights for justice and safety cannot be accused of ahimsa. If all the means, and this is important, अगर सारे के सारे जो रास्ते हैं, if all the means of maintaining peace have failed, then the responsibility of himsa falls on him who started war. This sounds like Lord Shri Krishna in Mahabharata. जब तक सारे के सारे reconciliation के अगर options खत्म हो जाते हैं कौरवों के साथ, तो धर्म युद्ध जो है वो justified है. Now moving on, and this is where
Sorry,
it's okay. Now second, the difference is about the question of in Marxist we find there is the dictatorship of the proletariats, and in here we find that Buddha he was a republic, he was a democrat. This is page 452. The Bhikkhu Sangh had been the most democratic constitution. He was only one of the bhikkhus. At the most, he was like a prime minister among the members of the cabinet. So one among the equals. He was not special in that sense. He was never a dictator. Twice before उनकी डेथ से पहले 2 बार उनसे पूछा भी गया कि अब आपकी डेथ होगी तो आप अपने सक्सेसर को तो कम से कम पॉइंट कर दो. And he refused to do that because it's against the democratic constitution. Now, and when it comes to the communist, like they take dictatorship. The end of dictatorship is to make the revolution a permanent revolution. This is valuable end, but can the communists say that in achieving the end they have not destroyed other valuable ends? Dictatorship is often defined as an absence of liberty or absence of parliamentary government. So, if dictatorship आए, definitely there will not be any liberty, there will not be any parliamentary government, and we have seen how in the Russian society or in China, when this dictatorship of the proletariats came, there was no withering away of the state. ऐसा तो यानी कि state wither away हो गया, जो कि मार्क्स ने कहा था. So it's against the liberty and it's against the democratic ideals. Now here in this next part, whose means are more efficacious? Now we see that there are 2 set of means promoted, one by Buddha, which is voluntary democratic, violence only to an extent where justified for the right cause, and in this case we find that means justified dictatorship of the proletariat. तो इनमें से कौन सा means जो है वो better है? कैसे assess करेंगे कौन सा means better है? तो ये कहते हैं कि वो वाला means better है which is more lasting. And this section, whose means are more efficacious is, we must now consider whose means are more lasting. One has to be chosen between the government by the force and the government by moral dispositions. Now, because he repeatedly talks of moral transformation of an individual, so this one becomes more sustaining rather than the government जो किसी force के through impose की. तो dictatorship क्या होती है? Dictatorship is the government which is by the force, not by the will of the people or by the moral transformation. This is the last section. I'll take another 5 minutes and we'll wind it up, which is the withering away of the state. Just before the paragraph withering of the state, I'll just conclude. This is probably the finest picture of what happens when the moral force fails and brutal force take place. What Buddha wanted was that each man should be morally so trained that he may himself become a sentinel of the kingdom of the righteousness. अगर हर इंसान अपने आप में इतना morally right हो जाएगा तो then we don't need a state. And this is where we see the convergence between Ram Rajya of Gandhi and of Buddha. Gandhi was an anarchist. He openly said that moral anarchist. We don't need state. He was also against the state because state requires consistent use of violence. ठीक है? No state can be a state without violence. कोई भी स्टेट बिना आर्मी के तो नहीं होगी ना. बिना आर्मी की नहीं होगी तो ऐसा तो है नहीं कि आर्मी वायलेंस नहीं करेगी. So Gandhi was against the state. He was an anarchist, but a moral anarchist because they believed in the righteousness of the man. And Buddha is also talking the same thing. Withering away of the state. The question is, we have not seen the withering of the state has happened in anywhere in the world. And he gives the example of Ashoka, that he completely renounced after the Kalinga war, he renounced violence. But the communists have no answer to this. At any rate, no satisfactory answer to be given. What would take place of the state when it withers away? What will happen? Like you said, what will happen if the state withers away? फिर कौन किसका रूल चलेगा? कैसे रूल चलेंगे? Through this question, though this question is more important than the question when the state will wither away. So this question has become important, that how will the state run? This is communists don't have answer to that. This is what the limitation of communism is. And now the last point, which is on the question of religion. Now what communists see religion as anathema. Their hatred for religion, and this is the last important, which is the hatred to religion is so deep-seated that they will not even discriminate between the religion which are helpful to communism and the religion which are not. So Ambedkar is making a distinction between the religion which is actually helping the cause of the communist. Buddha is communist in the sense that he created a communist society long before Karl Marx did, but using the moral force. And the distinction, because communists hate Christianity, they have extended their hate from Christianity to Buddhist without waiting to examine the difference between the two. The charge against Christianity levied by the communist was twofold. पहली बात, वो Christianity को क्यों hate करते हैं communist? Religion को क्यों hate करते हैं? दो reason है. पहला reason, because religion जो है वो otherworldliness की बात करता है, heaven की बात करता है, तो जो present generation जो suffer कर रही है poverty उसकी बात नहीं करता. That's why it becomes an opium for the masses. Otherworldliness. Second charge is the communist against Christianity is that religion. The charge is summed up in the statement that religion is the opium of the masses. This charge is based on the Sermon on the Mount, which is found in the Bible. जो Bible में लिखा गया है कि जो heaven है वो poor और weak को मिलेगा. लेकिन बुद्धा तो वो नहीं कह रहा. So Buddhism is different from Christianity. It's important to note here that same critique of religion applied by the communist is not applicable on Buddhism. Moving on. And this is where Russian example he gives, that in the last, this is page 461, Russians are proud of their communism, but they forget that the wonder of all the wonder is the Buddha established communism on the far as the Sangha was concerned without dictatorship. It may be that it was communism of very small scale, but it was a communism without dictatorship, a miracle which Lenin failed to do. Using moral force, he established communist state, communist society. Buddha's methods were different. His method was to change the mind of a man, to alter his dispositions voluntarily without using the force of compulsion through dharma. Now, last point is, I just conclude, which is, I see that the Russian dictatorship would be a good for all the backward countries, but this is not argument for permanent dictatorship. So he's saying that this will not sustain, dictatorship will not sustain because it comes with a force. Humanity does not only want economic values. It's not just like communists saying that economic is the primary tool. It also wants spiritual values, which is where communists fail to address the spiritual need of the people. Spiritual values to be relented. Permanent dictatorship has paid no attention to the spiritual values, does not seem to intend to. The political economy, which Karl talked, is a big philosophy, but the communist philosophy seems to be equally wrong. The communist philosophy seems to be equally wrong, for the aim of their philosophy seems to have fattened pig. Man must grow materially as well as spiritually. And the modern principles of the modern state, which comes from the French Revolution, liberty, equality and fraternity, which are very much part of Indian Constitution में भी लिखा है कि fraternity, liberty and equality. तो यहाँ पे ये तीनों आपस में कैसे कोलाइड कर रहे हैं और कहाँ where can we place Buddhist teaching? One, the French Revolution was welcome because of the slogan, it failed to provide equality. So French Revolution failed to provide equality, जो equality की demand जो Russian Revolution ने fulfill की. But it cannot be too much emphasized that in producing equality, society cannot afford to sacrifice fraternity. तो socialism brought the concept of equality to the forefront. कि देखो equality का एक मॉडल ये है कि communist state आएगा वो equal state होगा. But they compromise on the idea of fraternity and liberty because they teach violence, they promote dictatorship. तो वहाँ पे liberty will be compromised and fraternity will be compromised. Equality will be of no value without fraternity or liberty. It seems, and this is the last line, it seems that the three can coexist if one follows the way of Buddha. Communism can give one but not all. So this is what the final submission what Ambedkar is making, that communism fails to address the three requirements of the modern state, liberty, equality, fraternity at the same time because of the means which they are using, and which is where the difference from Buddha's means. I think I have spoken for long.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So,
Thank you.
Buddha's idea of moral dispositions, or whether it be Gandhi's idea of Ram Rajya, where moral force is the fundamental governing principle of a society. The problem I feel, and I can be wrong, please correct me, is that this voluntary moral disposition, you can easily also decide someday that this is a particular take I'm going to take, and this is not. So when we talk about discrimination against women or domestic violence, a person who is privileged enough to show a particular moral inclination in a particular way, perhaps can tomorrow also say that I'm not interested in this kind of moral disposition. So you need some sort of force of law, judiciary, or any other thing to maintain a proper structural disposition, not just moral disposition, because it's entirely voluntary.
Absolutely.
People who are privileged can say that this is what I'm going to follow in terms of moral disposition today, this is not. So I feel that and law is also a kind of violence because it forces you to act in a certain way.
True.
So you do need some backing, because I feel otherwise it would be
It's
like
very difficult.
it is difficult to
I'll just-
maintain structures of equality.
I might not be able to answer it, but if I have understood your question correctly, you are making 2 points. One is morality is very subjective. People in the power can say this is moral today and I might not say what is moral tomorrow. And second point which you said in reference was, how do you apply it? You know, like law is at least clear on certain sense.
It's like it forces you to do certain things. With morality, it's entirely voluntary.
It's
I might decide to follow a
Yes.
moral path today. I might not.
Yes.
I might see
Yes.
women discrimination and be against women discrimination as a moral disposition. Tomorrow, I might not be.
So what is that foundation on which we just stick upon? Like what is the foundation text?
Yeah, like
If
law
you're-
forces you.
Yeah,
It is in
yeah,
constitution.
yeah,
But what
yeah.
about moral disposition?
Wow.
It's entirely open.
So
to
there is, like what you're saying is this religious morality which can vary based upon your religion and your society. Okay, if you're a Hindu, you believe in certain things. If you're a Buddhist, you believe in certain things, right and wrong. But there's something called constitutional morality.
Yeah, so there's legal force there.
There is legal force.
So there is a force there.
There is a force. So there is a lot of overlap between the law and the morality. Morality is not some transcendental thing. So law carries some element of morality. Sometimes law violates morality. Okay, some law could be immoral. But there is a certain there is a definition, there is an area of constitutional morality which gives you what is right thing to do. So you don't have to rely on any religion for that matter.
So there is force there. It is not entirely moral disposition is then not entirely completely devoid of force, because constitutional morality means there are laws.
There is force. Yeah,
So
there
not
is a
entirely devoid of violence.
Yeah. True. So that's where the concern of minorities, for women, for any vulnerable section comes, that the backing comes. That's what Shaheen Bagh was. Shaheen Bagh protest was for this. That citizenship right is, you don't give a citizenship right. It's come from the constitution. So if we stick to constitutional morality, I think our fear of subjectivity, our fear of indecisiveness is taken care of. But again, constitution is also it's a force. Yeah, it's a force. Depends upon how well they're able to implement it.
It was also true for the Sabrimala case. Like,
Yeah.
There was the question of tradition versus modernity.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a very good case to look at. Yeah.
But there's also a difference in how morality is being treated. I think Karl Marx looks at morality in terms of a nationwide code of morality versus Buddha looking at it in a more individualist way. So there's the individual versus the like a wider treatment.
Karl Marx, can you rephrase? Karl Marx is talking about the nation.
Like in terms of this sense of morality that we talk about, I think Buddha looks at it in a sense individually, right? Individual sense.
Yeah, when he's talking about Appa Deepo Bhava, he's like find your own path. Like I can't tell you what is right and wrong.
But does Karl Marx look at it also from an
For
individual?
Marx, morality is also entirely dependent on the economic structures, the base.
Yeah.
So it's part of the superstructure. For
So
Marx,
he talks
it's
in
not
the
nation
structure
state, but the
history.
class struggle,
Yeah,
the economic
class
relations, the
struggle. It's a
relations of
macro.
production. Yeah.
But I think both are very important. That one is about the individual, one is about the class. So Marx is not concerned about one individual. He's concerned. Marx is concerned about the class, like the proletariats. Like he's concerned about their upliftment, but not the one person. Like Buddha is concerned about bodhisattva, like individual reforms.
Yeah, I
Like,
think because
is there-
Marx's idea of communism, the community itself, it goes
Yeah,
against the
so
idea of
he's-
individual privileges.
Yes.
That's where private
That's-
property
that's-
also comes in.
But how far is it practical to follow either Buddhism or communism? Like what they're asking is, in personal life,
I think that was a very interesting observation because now I recall if you read Manusmriti, Ambedkar's critique of Manusmriti, even that was like a Hindu book of law. So it is very much dependent on time. So back then it was considered okay. Manusmriti, whatever Manusmriti said, it was considered okay. But now if you read it, we are like, okay, what have you written?
the question of live-in relationship, like it could be immoral according to certain, but it's very much part of constitutional morality. You
So
get the
when,
right.
so in this essay, when the term moral disposition is used, it's used in a very universal sense. That is where I find it problematic. Just like you said, live-in relationship in a particular moral setup could be right, in a different moral setup it could be wrong. So moral constitution law, you at least have an objective structure that discrimination against women is.
There's also structural violence in the objective. So they take one stance of the moral side.
No,
I'm saying that there is.
Buddha in his 8 this Ashtangik Marg, he tells one of them is right conduct. So in the right conduct, he talks about same thing, like not to harm, not to cheat, not to do this. So he defines what is the moral conduct expected from a person. ठीक है, तो वहाँ पे there is clarity when he is talking.
I could understand the parallel you drew between what it was, Gandhi's Ramarajya and
Buddha's
what was it?
moral anarchist.
Huh?
Yeah, so he's saying that it's possible. See, Gandhi's Ramarajya is actually the communist state without violence. So no, Buddha is asking for the moral transformation of the individual to an extent that there will be no violence, the peaceful society will come. Okay.
But then he is saying that if there is an offender, they must be punished for the kind of offense they are doing. So he is not saying कि violence को पूरी तरीके से just छोड़ दो.
True.
हाँ, he is not saying कि only ahimsa is the way. He is saying that ahimsa is also the way when you need an offender, when you need to punish the offender so that it doesn't repeat. Because otherwise there will be no peace.
So that's where the difference between Gandhi and Buddha is. So it's not the means they agree. Buddha is talking about violence, Gandhi is not. But the end they are reaching is that you kind of create a commune society, not communist in the sense they're not justifying violence, not the dictatorship of the proletariats, but a society where peace exists because every individual is morally aware and more enlightened version of themselves. So they know the dharma, they know the what is right and wrong. अगर ये 8 अष्टांगिक मार्ग follow करोगे तो you will not be harming anyone, not in thoughts, not in speech, not in action.
And how is it comparable with Gandhi's Ramarajya?
Gandhi's Ramarajya
What are
is this only.
what are those fundamental vows, ideas, or principles on which Ramaraj is based upon? I mean, I don't think there are any such quotes, are there?
No, there is.
I don't know what.
No, there is comparison. Just like this is comparison between Buddha and Marx. So there is a clear comparison between Gandhi Ramrajya and Marxist communist state, and they differ.
No, you compared it with Buddha's idea of society.
Anarchist society.
Huh.
Yeah.
So,
Because they both agree on the moral.
this is your
This I
interpretation.
added. This I
Right,
added.
this is
Yeah.
This is what you added.
There is. I have not read
It
a
is
comparison
your-
between Buddha and Gandhi.
It is
I have
kind of
not-
a thesis
yeah,
or
yeah.
hypothesis you are giving,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I have not read something on Buddha and Gandhi, but the outcome
Hmm.
looks same. Yeah.
Okay. Because Gandhi के साथ problem क्या है, which Ambedkar also discusses in other writings, that जब बुद्धा अहिंसा की बात करते हैं तो he talks about violence faced by every individual due to structure and because of other individuals also. तो caste structure तो एक जो है वो तो है ही ना, it is perpetrating violence, आपको दिखे या ना दिखे, it is there. But Gandhi kind of negates that kind of a violence. वो उस तरह के violence की बात ही नहीं करते हैं. वो कहते हैं कि if you, so for example, his idea of Harijans was what? That if they are happy doing what they are doing, just respect them, respect their work. He is not even considering, it's kind of a denial that structural violence exists. He is not even going into the depth of feeling that we are discussing today, na? Unless we start discussing the feeling, and because untouchability, it is a violence. You are depriving certain section of society from the touch, from this human relationship. It is violence. Why do you not consider it as a violence? If you deny that kind of violence exists, you will say that society में तो harmony है, there is this peace. तो इसीलिए मुझे लगता है कि गांधी का idea of रामराज्य is not comparable with Buddha's idea of, या फिर Ambedkar's idea of peaceful and harmonious society, which has all, where individuals enjoy all kind of rights. तो मुझे नहीं लगता है कि they are comparable in that sense.
When did Gandhi write exactly about Ramraj? Was it in the?
Yeah, because I have not read the text, that's why I'm asking.
Gandhi's
But-
position on caste
Because
actually changed.
Gandhi's
Gandhi refers to
understanding
Buddha.
of
He
violence
refers
is
to
very
Buddha
different.
in his text. He talks of. But what you're saying is important. That because even Buddha is not promoting the same kind of caste reformation.
Let's take it from gender's perspective. We had read that paper of Sujata Patel where we criticized Gandhi for being not feminist. No, he was not a feminist. He was more like a paternalistic or patronizing figure.
True.
So it is from to, if we see from contemporary point of view, we'll see that it's a violence against women. He denied their access to livelihood, है ना? Just by
True, yeah,
हाँ,
it is
तो
a
it is
violence.
isn't it a violence?
It
It
is
is
a
against,
violence,
because
yeah.
in history if we'll trace the history, इतना ज़्यादा जो participation of women था, it fallen, and इतना सारा जो अलग-अलग उनके लिए avenues खुलने वाले थे, तो
Generational violence is
exactly, it
yeah.
is generational
It is
violence.
generational
तो
violence,
economic
true.
liberation जो मिलना था, जो emancipation होना था, तो he kind of closed the door for it. Isn't it a violence?
He
It
called
is violence.
women queens of
Queens of
household.
house.
Yeah.
Gandhi.
So if you see that, तो मुझे नहीं लगता है कि वो उस level पे जाके गांधी engages with the idea of peaceful society, and he understands the violence that in that manner. Because his
His
view
idea
is
of Ramraj is spiritual.
From very
you
spiritual.
can talk. That's what the critique is. Gandhi is not addressing the question of caste upfront. So he's talking about spiritual, like you said,
Caste,
morality,
gender,
very
sexuality.
individual, very subjective sense. So it's
So
very limited
Ambedkar
understanding of-
Ambedkar would have rejected that comparison, like between the Ramrajya and
Yeah,
and
that
the
is what I'm
Buddhas
saying, that it's very
and
controversial.
this kind of
Gandhi
society.
was also very directly against mass democracy. Even when he talks about decentralization, when we read about how he talked about gram panchayats and all, that villages
he
should
was-
have power, and
yeah,
he was in some way also, I mean, directly against mass democratization. When we read Hind Swaraj, he specifically mentions when large number of people are given an opportunity to speak, then havoc gets created in the society. So how is he supporting Ram Rajya, mass democracy ki you are
Also,
against?
and Gandhi's idea of ideal village, self-sustainable ideal village,
yeah,
that is also, if you will look
yeah.
at it is
That's
not.
what Ambedkar
हाँ,
calls it, den of ignorance, and
Yeah.
it's highly casteist.
Go to the village and see, even if
Yeah.
it is self-sustaining, is it
Yeah.
not violent? It is. it is towards the marginalized sections and women. It is violent. तो violence पे मुझे नहीं लगता है कि I found it bit out of place and controversial also. इसीलिए मैंने point out किया. Otherwise,
if there is some comparison, because Gandhi refers to Jainism, he refers to Buddhism. If there is some, we'll read if there is exist. I'm not sure, but so I'll refrain from making that comparison. Yes, that was an individual opinion.
And also this like Gandhi makes all of these like he makes all of these romantic ideas like women are queen of the houses, and even like it is similar to like how like we say that मतलब औरतें तो भगवान होती है like आप उनको इंसान की तरह ट्रीट नहीं करते, भगवान पहले बना देते हो.
He was against suffrage movement. Directly he was against the suffrage movement.
And even like the Harijan means child of God. So basically you are not treating them as human, पहले ही भगवान बना दिया. तो even that is the critique of why Harijan is said. So like Gandhi is roaming around in these romantic ideas like without focusing on the material realities.
True.
But that idealism also helped him elevate as a leader.
Yeah, that is true. Because that gives him a saintly figure.
As a political leader, that idealism works a lot.
If there was something good about Gandhi, I mean, there must be many things, but one thing that was particularly good was his idea of ecology. So when he talked about ecology, so here his idea coincides with Marx's idea, when he is against industrialization and he's talking about a life of just for subsistence for everybody. So his idea for ecology is somewhat good, but for others it's very controversial, it's very problematic.
And I think there will always be some or the other overlaps or convergence in all these ideas, because ultimately there is this goal that they look up to that society will be this harmonious, people will be living with peace and all. It's just that again we were discussing that means क्या होना चाहिए, तो means are important.
So when I said that जो बुद्धा ultimately achieve करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, so if everybody becomes moral, so एक universal utopian world बनेगा ना. So that is something which I.
But who has to follow it? Who is Buddhist now? Those are the people who are going to follow. It's not like you are going to impose all this relation on everyone. It's not like that. Ambedkar is reading Buddha and Karl Marx and then comparing them. It's not like everyone is Marxist. Similarly, not everyone is going to be Buddhist. Buddhism self-righteousness hoga if you really believe in all these morality and principles.
They are very difficult to believe.
They, for you maybe for not other people, yeah. And then again, there could be multiple interpretations also.
Anybody wants to make any points, because already. Okay, so thank you very much for making this very lively discussion. So we do have invitations open. If you're not part of the group, just let us know, we'll add you to the group. Every Friday if you want to offer and do some reading which you're doing in your other spaces, you want to share, you can come and present any feminist text, we are welcome. So
I think any text from feminist things. Not a feminist text.
The space is all yours. We'll facilitate more such readings, and if there is feedback, we are open to that. We welcome all your feedbacks.
You want to present?
Please do. I've been too much. Just we'll end in this last page. Just talk to you. Gorevar, you want to run it here?
I mean, it's a movie.
Yeah, I've
I
seen
want to
that.
have, like, we can have discussion on that.
Yeah, we already watched it, right, in Mosaic.
I think
Gorevar.
what he's asking for is the
That
discussion.
was the contemporary, like, the recent one, Gorevar in
Aaj.
Acha.
not the original one. Because there was
Let's think of a time when we can have a movie movie. What do you call movie display? क्या बोलते हैं उसको?
Movie
screening.
Screening, yeah.
So we will
Movie
need to
screening.
schedule it like around 3 p.m. then, because 3 to 5 movie, 5 to 7 discussion.
We have done it twice. I think one was India Untouched by Stalin. There's a documentary.
Yeah.
We did that.
And another also. What was it? Something silent. What was
Silent.
it?
Yeah.
It was a documentary.
ठीक है. I think with this note, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's come to